Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world and what time of day it might be. My name is Jake Bernardes. I'm the CISO here at Anecdotes. Anecdotes is a compliance automation platform aimed at solving problems for enterprises, aims at improving your GRC and compliance practices, making them more streamlined, more efficient, and empowering them with data. We're also a very close partner and good friends with Schellman. And so it's a great honor and a privilege for us to be part of this conference today. My webcam does seem to be flickering slightly. That seems to be a requirement for a replaced webcam. Please don't be concerned that I've downloaded DeepSeek and since been hacked by the Chinese government. It's merely a technical fault. I'm going to talk a little bit today about GRC, compliance, data, how they fit together, and debunk some of the myths and issues that we've got in the industry right now. I believe that we've got a bit of a compliance fatigue issue, where we're in a time and a problem where people are starting to lose faith in the process. And I want to restore some of that faith by talking about how we got here and how we get away from here. So without further ado, this one is entitled Modernizing Audits with the Power of Data Evidence. A bit about me. I think it's important to understand the person you're listening to and some of the ways that I think and why I think that way. And this will become very relevant later on when I share some personalities about how I think about data. I said, my name is Jake Bernardes. I am an avid runner. That is a shot from the London Marathon, I believe. I run multiple marathons. It's a big passion of mine. I have two children. We are big skiers. We live in the UK. We tend to go to the French Alps at least once, maybe twice a year. And I'm a massive road cyclist. That's not actually my bike, that's a rental, but I've taken my bike all over the world. And if we cross paths physically at some point and you want to ride or run, or it's the winter and you want to ski, please let me know. I also welcome any questions there might be about this presentation. You can find me pretty easy on LinkedIn. I'm a pretty active poster, or through my podcast, or also directly through email. Please feel free to reach out if you disagree with me, if you want to ask for some further detail, you want some collateral, you want the evidence that supports what I say, just reach out. I'm always happy to have a conversation. I think that it's an important part of our community, particularly in the GRC world, that we have these discussions openly and transparently. Why do I know a little bit about what I'm talking about? I started my career as a consultant. I'm everything from a pen tester, specializing in social engineering, to breach and incident response, to VC work in GRC and TPRM consulting at IBM, KPMG, and NCC Group. I was the CISO at SingleStore, a rapid growth database company at Wistic, a TPRM provider, and now at Anecdotes. I've done VC and advisory work at two of the biggest retail brands in the US, Crocs and Maui Jim, and also a rapidly growing technology company based out in Canada, as well as multiple other engagements. So that's just to give a little bit of context that I have run and built GRC programs in several places, that I'm a practitioner and not a sales guy. So hopefully what I come and speak to you today comes from a very different place. I've lived and worked all over the world. My poor wife, bless her, has followed me with children in tow as we've moved to the Far East, the Middle East, to the US, to the West Coast, and then to the Central, then back to Europe, and who knows where we'll end up. I've worked all over the world, both in a residential and also in a singular kind of fly there and back capacity. So I've seen also GRC and compliance practices, as well as broader information security practices in so many different environments with different regulatory requirements and also often different technology approaches as a standard and norm. Let's get into it. Enough about me. SOC 2 used to be a measure of good security. I pulled this logo off someone's actual website. I won't say who because that would be a little bit harsh, but obviously for those watching, you do know that you can't be SOC 2 Type 2 certified. Hopefully you know that. But it's become a statement. It's become a sales enablement tool, but it's also become a participation award. When you're a child and you aren't great at sports maybe, and you go to your school sports day and you get a medal for taking part. And that's kind of where SOC 2 is in my mind. It's been commoditized, it's been democratized, but to a point now where people talk about with sheer confidence, we got SOC 2 in 30, 60, 90 days. Pre-revenue, many startups and growth companies, SaaS products that you will buy. That to me is deeply worrying, and it's a place we shouldn't be in. And I think we need to fix it. SOC 2 was obviously launched in its modern incarnation in 2010. At that point, it was mainly reserved for financial institutions, pharma, healthcare. It was hard to get, but now everyone has it. Many ask, is that a good thing? Is that something which is positive, that it's now become broader spread, that we've raised the security standard of the average business to meet SOC 2? Or have we, as I think, probably more realistically, reduced the average requirements of SOC 2 to meet where the standard or normal scale of business is? The other thing that you've got now is a massive change in how this is costed. Many of you will use a premium auditor. That's why you're in this conference, you're talking to Schellman, right? And what you get there is a price which allows people to deliver expertise, time and focused effort to understand your environment, not just your technical environment, but the environment which you sit in from a contextual sense of the regulations that apply to the industry you're in, the geographies that you're in. And also on top of that, allow them to deliver valuable insights by the fact that once they're in your environment for this time, they'll see and spot other things that maybe have to talk to you and support you out. So overall, you're improving or maturing your program. We've seen SOC 2 now, I think the lowest I've seen is like $5,000-$7,000, which Schellman will be screaming right now because I'm giving you horrible price comparisons. But the reality is that those audits are also terrible. They spend at that point for profitability, maybe a couple of hours. They check a box, they deliver a report, but I wouldn't trust it. In fact, I don't. When we look at vendors as part of our third-party risk management program, we don't simply just accept SOC 2s. We want to know who it's from. We want to know the detail it went into. We want to see what happened. For us, this isn't just about profitability. As a security practitioner, it's actually about what you're delivering as a service. What value are you adding to me? The problem is also further than just we're SOC 2 certified. It's the concept that the whole thing is based on ticking a box. It's this idea that you're based on simply the existence of a control, not the efficacy or adequacy of a control. There are many auditors are now devaluing our industry and devaluing what we think about assurance because they're effectively saying, well, if there's a green tick, if it's there, then it's there, right? And I think we need to shift away from that rhetoric and back often into the past and look at actually, well, how did we used to do this? And can we take a modernized approach to a traditional method? So again, a modernized approach to a traditional method. And what do I mean by that? A lot of compliance automation tools have gone down the route just saying, run a check, come back, green tick, red cross. It means yes or no. If there's a green tick, it works, and therefore it's active, and therefore it's effective. That's not necessarily true. You haven't given the context of what is that control test actually running? Did it only run today? Has it been active for the last 90 days, the last 365 days? What variances were there in that period? So just seeing a green tick. Now, I think the traditional approach is obviously looking at sample-based, maybe screenshots, maybe process workflows, maybe a .csv, maybe a database dump. But what that gave you was real evidence, real data. You weren't ticking a box, you were analyzing, you were subjectively producing thoughts and insights that improved the posture of a business and how they saw and acted towards their compliance program. So again, I'm not saying we should all go back to just that approach, but I think we have to find a way to modernize that approach to arm auditors with real valuable data in an automated fashion, but not with just a binary yes, no. And that's part of what Anecdotes does, and we'll get to that in a bit. Let's take a step even further back. What's assurance? We live in a world where we talk about reasonable assurance, right? It's not absolute assurance. It's based on a process of sampling. It's based on a process of review. It's based on a process of understanding and subjectivity. That means that you have reasonable assurance that your business is meeting the requirements of a given regulatory standard or framework. Now, I think often we should go away from that. I think the future probably holds that. I know that many people at Schellman who I interact with agree with me that you want eventually to get to a point, ideally, of absolute assurance, where you're actually enabling yourselves to review all data in the set, not a mere sampling basis, and therefore giving real confidence and a real concrete statement of this was this way all the time and forever. But we're not there yet. So we rely on this concept of reasonable assurance. But that reasonable assurance itself has to be based on evidence, fact, and data. The problem that you have is in our industry, and many of you will know, we're now driven by a race to the bottom. Now that's caused real problems. I've had different auditors at different companies I've advised or supported or helped at the time. Schellman's one of my favorite to work with. There are other auditors I think are great too. This is not a product pitch for me. But what you get when you get a premium auditor is you get people who are experienced, they know their industry, they're technologically competent. They can speak and understand cloud security architecture, how IAM functions work, how encryption keys are rotated. They understand concepts better, and they have the time inside of those audits to be able to apply themselves to learning and understanding your environment, your processes, your infrastructure, and not just producing a report, but giving you valuable insights and guidance on how to improve and mature what you're doing. the math says effectively if we try and drive down the prices of audits constantly and have this budget auditing, this mum and pop shops as we call them, then what you're actually getting is eventually going to kill off any form of assurance that you can provide, because people will lose faith in the certificates and in the reports. And at that point, we've all got problems, because how do you actually ever provide assurance to a buyer if they can't trust the assurance you're providing? So we need to make sure we protect that minimum standard of quality auditing. Right, now I've debunked the myth of what SOC-in-a-box is, and all those things previously were referred to as SOC-in-a-box, this concept that you can now do it off the shelf, one size fits all, click button, and it works. And it's not true. I've frequented many times for RSA, San Francisco. I used to work there a lot, and I've always stayed at the Intercontinental near the Moscone Center. If anyone's ever been there before, you may or may not know there is a gym. And inside of that gym, there are a series of windows in front of the treadmills, and they have a series of sayings on them, which are obviously focused on promoting your exercise, your health, and your well-being. However, I thought this one was fascinating. I saw this a couple of months ago. It says, if it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you. Of course, their reference is to the point of if you don't work hard and it doesn't hurt, then you're not getting any better. But it made me think about data. If you think about the biggest, most important companies in the world right now, Netflix, they're not selling TV programs, they're selling a knowledge of what you're going to watch. They know what you want because of the data they have. Amazon, they're not a retailer, they're a data reseller. They know your propensity to buy, the likelihood for what you're going to buy. They stock their warehouses based on the likelihood of what people in that geography are going to buy. That's all based on data. And Google being the biggest of them all, Google is a company based purely on data. It knows how you think and when you'll think and why you'll think that way. But all of those companies have got to where they are by taking the concept of ingesting data, learning from it, being openly challenged by it, and progressing and developing their business model to adapt to it. I spoke earlier about how we modernize audits with traditional methods. And I think this is, for me, the key. We're now in a place where we can absorb and consume and represent huge volumes of data in a way they can be analyzed, digested, and consumed by an auditor to allow them to make and produce more concise and more value-driven reports and findings, because they have the data to challenge them to make the assumptions that will change you, to put my saying into force. GRC teams are used to working in a very traditional way. And I think we need to get them into a way where, I hate the buzzword, but we optimize their efforts in as much as we arm them with data so that they can actually focus their efforts, their time, their resources, their skill sets into the areas on a risk-based approach, into the areas where you need it most, where it will drive the greatest value, where it will align the best to the business's overall wider outcomes, and where it will actually enable them to focus on delivering what their leadership and what that leadership actually wants in terms of a security posture and a compliance posture. I'm going to go off topic. Bear with me, because I will come back and it will make sense. We're talking about data. I'm a runner. I ran the London Marathon just past COVID. I was given about, this was probably the start of my running journey. I was given about 9 weeks. I was given a charity spot by a school for people with physical and mental disabilities called Seashell Trust, which is a cause dear to my heart. They gave me very little time to train. I got out and started running, and I turned up the London Marathon and I ran. Simple as that. I turned up and I ran. I'm sorry, this is all in kilometers. I'm a Brit. I don't understand miles per hour or minutes per mile. So you can do the translation if you want. But effectively, I did a just under 4-hour marathon, which is what my aim was. Great. Turned up, ran. Great day. It hurt. Fine. I took up running on the back of this. 3 years later, so this time last year, I ran the same marathon in 3 hours 11, which is 49 minutes, give or take. So let's say 50 for the sake of argument, faster than this one. Why is any of this relevant? Bear with me. I trained properly and focused, driven by data, and improved my performance significantly. Only 6 months after that, so we've done about 2 years, roughly 2.5 years. 6 months later, I went and ran a half marathon in horrendous weather in the north of England, hence you can't even see the sky. By the way, that's part of our daily lives. So if you live in California, remember today that you're blessed. And I ran it even quicker. So that would have put me sub 3 hours for a marathon. Okay, we're talking about running numbers and Strava, and why does anybody care? Pictures of me with medals around my neck. What happened in between is the important fact. This happened in between. This is an app called Runner, RUNNA, if people are interested. It is an app which drives your running training programs based on real-time data and based on then the wider set of not just your data, but everyone's data to learn how to improve and drive better performance and therefore better outcomes. Why does data change outcomes? It's not so much the presence of data that makes it valuable, it's the practical application of it. Let me say that again, it's not the presence of data that drives value, it's practically being able to apply it. In this case, it's knowing when to train, what to train, how to train. In GRC, it's knowing what to focus on, how to focus on it, and when to focus on it. Therefore, using your resources in a more efficient and effective way. Data without application is useless. For a long time, we've talked about big data, and big data exists in many businesses who use it for no purpose whatsoever because they simply have the presence of data. If you can't practically find a way to apply it to improve a problem or solve a problem, then it means nothing. Let's look at this. This is actually one of my actual workout plans in July last year, apparently. So in this week, it told me what to do. It told me to go on an easy run, a long run, a tempo run, which means a quicker run for a short period of time, and a set of mile repeats, which are usually pretty much flat out sprint miles with gaps and walking in between. Now, those 4 components of a running training program are fairly common across any runner, and anyone else who's listening who's a runner may well come across that or seen similar things before. What makes this specific is if you can see, it's actually showing not only did I do the run, but it's showing me my time was, what my average pace was. It's measuring my performance. Now, inside of each of those, let's take, for example, the Tempo 4K. On my watch, it will have been telling me through my headphones, Jake, you need to run this fast. And during that run, it will have said, Jake, go faster, or Jake, go slower. Jake, you need to rest now, right? It will have given me audio cues. Now, my ability to adhere to what it's asking me to do will be demonstrated in the back end of the app. So if I clicked into any of those sections, it would show in the Tempo 4K what my performance was in the 4K, as well as it looks like there was a warm-up and a cool down either side. And it would tell me if I'd performed adequately, if I'd met my goal. If I have met my goal, it will continue to produce training in line with what it wants me to have at this point. If I exceeded it, it might make the next requirements get faster or harder. If I'd missed it, it might slow them down. What's interesting is what has as an end result. We always talk about outcomes, being outcome focused, being intent driven in leadership. Now, what this goes to is actually tells you if you start planning for an event, say the London Marathon, and you might do a 16-week training plan. At the beginning of that 16 weeks, it takes a measure of you. You might go out and do a 5K, or you might have previous historic results to put in, and it'll tell you how fast you're going to run a marathon in 16 weeks time if you follow their training. I've now used it in 6 events. And I've never been more than 2 minutes out, bearing in mind some of these are 3-hour events. Now, why is that interesting? Because what it shows is in a constant pattern of me performing against their suggested activities. A, the data set they've got from a very large volume of people in terms of how you have to train to produce a specific result is proven to be true. But B, more importantly, what they've also then got is focused evidence against my individual performance and tweaked and moved my plan. And that end number did change occasionally to the point that it knows almost exactly what I'm capable of if I perform according to what's suggested or prescribed in front of me. Now, similarly, in our world, that broad, large data set is benchmarking. What do companies around you that are like you do? And if you do the same things, you should have similar results. Similarly, if you then take a focused approach of ingesting and learning from your own performance data for GRC and compliance and using that to decide what to do next, then you will maximize your opportunity to perform the best within your given set of resources or sphere or requirements. Without data, you're just running. It's a saying, it's pretty prevalent in the running world. If you go out and just run a 5K over and over again, you might get marginally faster as you get fitter, but you won't get significantly faster. It's the same concept that says that true insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Right? The reality is that if you want to improve, you have to find a way to learn, challenge, and adapt. And all of that requires data. What is compliance? According to a friend of mine who was quoted in Security Magazine, compliance provides the framework needed for implementing security measures that protect sensitive data and information. So the end result of compliance should be protecting data and information. It should not be enabling sales. Notice that as a point. Interesting factor. It's the framework for implementing security measures. Compliance is not a prescriptive amount of controls. It's a framework or approach. It may be different for everyone. Your business may not need to adhere to PCI, HIPAA or FedRAMP, but maybe you take one of those as a framework. I don't know why you would, but maybe you do. Maybe you build your posture around what you want to achieve on a risk-based approach of where you think your core risk areas are in your industry, in your position right now. It's a framework. It's about finding, if we want to do A, what are the controls that sit within that framework that will allow us to get to be able to demonstrate or provide assurance in that position. How do you monitor compliance? That one gets tricky, right? Lots of people will say you get audited and you either pass or you don't. You do internal audits. You test control efficacy. You benchmark, or maybe you just say we didn't get breached. Right? That's the classic kind of security get out, right? I think they're all true to a large degree, but I think that similar to my runner analogy, if you want to really monitor compliance, you need data that shows how you're performing now and then, and then you need to adapt and tweak to see that as you start to raise the bar based on the fact that you're exceeding your requirements, are you still meeting those? So it's monitoring requires real-time data, and real-time data comes from a source. If you want to gather real-time data from people, from human effort, you can. Of course, you always can. It takes a lot of effort. It's not the most obvious or easy of processes, and it also requires a lot of process documentation in case those people leave. But there's obviously always ways to do multiple things. How do you know it's improving? You got your cert, you passed your audits, a bit tenuous because that doesn't mean it's improved, it just means it hasn't got worse. You've got better in your benchmarking, although your benchmark is subjective because it depends on how you benchmark yourself against other people. I think sometimes it's quite hard. I think, again, without real data, in the same way as me using Runner to show how I performed in Strava, I can show measured improvement because numbers don't lie. Data doesn't lie. How do you know it's improving? Is you live in the data. You live or die by the data. It shows if you're here or where you might be in relation to where you think you are. I've talked a lot about automation and collection of data, so let's just automate everything, right? Let's just automate the whole lot. Get rid of auditors. Sorry, Schellman, you're out, you're done, you're gone. We're just going to collect evidence into a platform, show that it continues to continuously complies to the requirements. We'll automatically issue a SOC 2 back into the platform. Here's your certificate. See you later. See you next year, right? If you ask Chat GPT what SOC-in-the-box is, they give you this, a Jack in the box with SOC 2 written on it. I did not make that diagram. I don't know if it's my thoughts or efforts on social media that contribute to it, but that's what you get. And I think it depends, is always the answer, right? If there are a world in which I say, fine, automate the collection and processing of evidence in an entire manner. They're usually in kind of true startups or a very simplified stack or very early stage companies. I don't think there's a single world in which you ever want to remove an auditor. I think we need human expertise. We need an unbias. We need, to a degree, also to have the subjectivity to spot what contextuality means. We will always need an auditor, a third-party independent attestation of what your control efficacy is, regardless of what the data says and what the platform says. And I will always stand by that as a statement. How can data change outcomes in this world? We talked about how in running, if you have the data, you can focus and practice and train your performance based on the data that's presented to you. Similarly, in GRC, I feel like as a CISO now, I play a little bit like a game of whack-a-mole. Again, ChatGPT, whack-a-mole. It's very hard to know where to focus. I'm constantly being asked questions by different parts of the business in terms of what do we do about AI? What about privacy? This customer asked this question. This customer's found this. We're going to go down this compliance route. Could you be FedRAMP if we needed you to be? These questions constantly come at you, and it's very hard to work out, well, where should I've got limited resources. Where should I focus them? And I think going back to how can data change outcomes? That's where it really applies. It helps me to work out which of those moles to whack in which order, or which ones are the more dangerous, which ones are carrying the plague. Not that moles carry plague, but they look like rats, so let's go with it. What it does is it enables me to know what to do next. And I think that is core and fundamental, particularly in a compliance effort, and for a CISO to oversee that as part of their broader information security program, is to know where to focus my effort and time next. So like you are just running without data, Without data, you're just running compliance. If all you do is make sure you gather the screenshots, the output files, and the relevant pieces to go to your audits every year, or even with your internal audits every quarter, whatever it might be, without real data, all you're doing is producing that result and hoping that in those interim periods, everything's working fine. You don't know. You'll never really improve. You'll never really mature. You'll just kind of stay stagnantly where you are. And the reality is that data is what drives improvement. But I do caveat these things. I think it's important when we talk about this to talk about what was automatable and what isn't, and how that automation journey looks. So it all starts with evidence collection. You will not be living under a rock for the last several years, so you've seen that the automation of evidence collection is fairly prevalent in the GRC and compliance world right now. Now, automating the collection of evidence from AWS, CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, GCP, your Google Drives, Okta, Jump Cloud, Sneak, whatever it might be, right? There's hundreds of applications in the security and compliance stack that are relevant. That bit's not hard. APIs. Why is Anecdotes different to a lot of people? Let's talk about it. I think the core one is that we focus on custom written APIs. So a lot of people use an API. You take it to your engineering team, I can tell you they will not be big fans of the fact you're now delivering an open API connectivity into your live production AWS environment. Take it to the security engineering team, they probably won't be big fans of the fact they've now gone in a Sneak environment. But we build completely everything out from scratch custom, which means all our APIs are genuinely least privileged and scope to granular level access controls to say, I only want to require or move this piece of evidence. It also gives us another little cool party trick, which is where we can go to something called the evidence lab, and you can custom script the collection of specific evidence. It might not be relevant to a specific control or part of SOC 2 or NIST or ISO, whatever it might be. It's just something you want to know. But because you have that connection, that availability to script it, you can actually do whatever you want and grab whatever you want to show whatever you want. Back to my evidence collection. So evidence collection is automated. Fine. You've got to map it. So the next hard bit is if you're going to collect the evidence and you collect one piece of evidence which effectively maps against multiple frameworks, you have to understand how that mapping works across all frameworks and how the control language in each of those is different, but the requirement is actually the same. That bit's hard, but not undoable. We've had control mappings in Excel documents for a long time. Scoping. You have to know what's actually required. So are all of those AWS environments in scope or only some of them? Because you don't want to put the wrong ones in scope, or else you're now producing evidence and results which you're going to fix, which don't need fixing. Scoping is really key and fundamental. Don't collect everything. Collect only in scope data that maps to the controls or frameworks that you're adhering to. You've got to be able to analyze that data. You need monitoring rules in place so that you can shape your analysis to avoid false positives and to get alerted on actual gaps, not on false gaps. For this to work, it needs to be real and it needs to be provable. You need to then, if you're going to have alerting, you need to have monitoring, right? You need to have processes in place for reviews, alerting, and remediation. And how are you going to deal with those? Are they going to go into Jira tickets, Slack alerts? What are you going to do? And what's your SLAs for fixing them? You need to be able to validate them. So you need to know that if something happens, that you can go back and find out, well, what actually happened? Yes, go back to my first couple of slides. Yes, that green tick went to a red cross, but why did it? What changed? And how can I see what changed? You have to be able to validate to know if you can fix it, right? In the compliance world, I feel like for a long time, we've just kind of been like looking at stuff bluntly and going, well, if it doesn't work, it needs fixing. We would never look at that in the AppSec world. If Sneak comes up with some kind of vulnerability in the code before I pass it to R&D, I can tell you for sure that I'm going to go and test it, validate. I'm going to recreate it. Now, we should be doing the same things in our compliance world. We should be recreating findings to make sure they actually do have not just the same problem, but the validity of the problem that we think they do. And then the most important thing right now, as always, you need to be able to report. How are you going to show your compliance posture in any given point in time? If you're asked by a customer, I need to see it now. I don't care where you SOC 2 because it came 6 months ago, or your ISO. I want to see now how you comply to NIST. There's no certificate for NIST, right? How do you report on this, both internally and externally? We can get into a whole different conversation about trust centers and transparency and trust, but maybe that's a conversation for another day. But you need to be able to report on it. So that is to say that the collection of evidence, the automation of the collection of evidence, the data point that most of you will have conceived as being the key or the fundamental pin here is actually just the base layer, it's the foundation. That data requires multiple layers or strata to be able to actually get to a point where its value is really, really driven and really, really actually resonating inside the organization. So why are Anecdotes and Schellman a partnership? Why do we care? Let's look at a general audit and let's look at the concepts around how we can improve it. You're going to have an audit for ISO 27001. Schellman's going to come and they're going to produce an IRL inside of the platform, AuditSource in this case, and they're going to ask you for all this evidence. Now, your team may have been pulling this evidence on a regular basis and keeping weekly, daily, monthly, quarterly samples of all evidence. May not. So they may, in either case, have to go and find all those pieces and upload to the platform, or they're going to have to go and get all that source evidence to begin with, and according to the requirements, upload to the platform, right? There's a lot of work there, and you need not only to have the physical time and expertise, but also the access to those specific systems or subsets of data. So the first point, the collection of evidence we talked about already, right? You look at here, you've got Google, Cloudflare, CrowdStrike, AWS, multiple tools, right? Monday, it keeps going. They can pull all the data that's relevant to the controls they're outlined in the IRL into Anecdotes. Now, Anecdotes post them into controls, but doesn't just do green tick, red cross. Into each control, it shows the evidence as a JSON file, the historical report of the evidence, the variances that have happened. If there's a non-compliance, you can see what's gone wrong because you can open the JSON and understand the evidence, right? The evidence and the data is the key here. Inside of our platform, you do a whole world of things. You can use full risk management suite. You can do user access reviews. You can manage your whole compliance stack from top to bottom. You can create custom script evidence. You can build workflows to do all kinds of things to enact Jira tickets and Slack alerts if A, B, or C happens. There's a lot you can do, but this is not a pitch on Anecdotes. If you want one, let me know. Once the evidence is in Anecdotes, and this is a problem that a lot of compliance platforms have, is you've still got to get the auditor to get the evidence. Now, say Schellman comes and we can create an auditor role for them in Anecdotes. Great. They want to do that? Wonderful. They'll go into the platform. They're still going to have to pull almost every piece of evidence themselves from the platform and post it into AuditSource because they want to maintain it sort of their platform for regulatory and for reporting purposes. Fine. So what Anecdotes did is built the in-between as well. So we have 180 plus, I think it's 200 plus cross plugins at this point, and more than 1,000 pieces of automated data evidence. This is a slightly older slide, mapped against 5,000 fully cross-mapped controls or requirements. They will all port into AuditSource inside of Schellman. So from foundational application to Schellman AuditSource audit period evidence collection, we'll do the whole thing. There is no requirement for human intervention at any point inside of that process. That is not just automation. That is taking traditional audit approaches, premium-based auditor in Schellman, spending the right amount of time, value, and insights, using their traditional IRL, their information request, this upload platform, but modernized through automation. We collect the evidence through the platform and post it to those controls, meaning that you can spend time working with the auditors on valuable things, on conversations about what's going on, about why it's the way it is, about how you might want to improve this, about what the industry benchmarks, what they've seen in other customers are. What we're doing is removing the work that no one wants to do and allowing you and them to focus on the work that everyone should do. Risk-based approach to compliance and GRC, focusing time, effort, and resources on the things that matter most. That's the key that underpins all of this. If you take one thing away from this, please let it be that. 3 steps to how to get started in this world. 1, work out why you're doing compliance. I've spoken to a lot of Schellman customers in my time. Most of them are doing compliance for the right reason. It's because they want to protect the data of their users and customers, as we saw what compliance really is, and they value that approach, and that's what drives them. They want to achieve a better security posture. They also more than likely have the skills and the expertise and teams in place, usually in the organizations that Schellman works with, to be able to deliver those results. And when driven with data, can do it in an even more efficient and more effective way. I think the only question I would always ask here is when you say, why are you doing compliance, is work out what your leadership team wants to see. And I don't mean they'll want to know that you're compliant, but how do they want to consume that? How will you evidence that? How will you show that? How will you report that? Evaluate what you're currently doing. Does it work? Maybe it does. Maybe everything I've said was just a waste of 35 minutes. Maybe it doesn't. And even if it does, I would argue that automation can always improve things. If you automate in the right places in the right way, you're not taking away, it's not about time-saving exercise, it's about improving efficacies. It's about making things actually work in a better way. And we'll come in a second to why that's also really good as a business and as a security team, aside from just actually delivering audit results. Once you've worked out what you want to do or why you're doing it, you've reviewed your current resources and approach, and you've worked out what can and can't be automated, then use data to guide your approach, your implementation, and your outcomes. If you want to work out what data can drive in terms of value or outcomes for you, apply data. That's always the reality of this. And when you have it, use it. Work it out, look at best practices. There's multiple guides. Schellman has multiple reference customers, so do we. You can POC before you buy. You can ensure the results reflect reality and just don't inherently trust what comes out as a ticker across. Configure, map it. Understand that data is actually driving an improvement or a maturity. Final 3 thoughts. If you want to retain employees in GRC and compliance, allow them to focus on the things that are meaningful to them. Allow them to remediate, allow them to solve problems, allow them to drive maturity. Don't give them hour after hour of tasks that's focused on evidence collection and evidence posting. That's a good way to increase our burn rate in terms of employees in compliance and GRC type roles. Happier auditors are ones that have data in their platform and can focus on valuable insights. The reason that we partner so closely with Schellman, we do a lot of events, and we're doing one in Salt Lake actually in a couple of weeks. If you want to learn more about that, you can look at my LinkedIn or reach out to him at Anecdotes or Schellman. The reason we do those kind of events together is because it makes everyone's experience better. For the auditors to have data in their platform in the way they expect it, in the way they can consume it, means that they can focus on giving you the best results in the most efficient manner, and also giving you valuable additional insights in terms of how you improve your maturity of your program and protect, again, the data of your customers and users. And happy leaders, I've been a CISO multiple times. Happy leaders know what's going on today. They don't know what's going on 3 months ago. They don't know what's going on 6 months ago. They know what's going on today because they have data. If I ask where are we right now in compliance to FedRAMP in case I have to do it tomorrow, I can see where I'm in compliance to FedRAMP right now. I then also know, because of the data, what needs fixing. If there's a non-compliance or a requirement to mature my program, I can see where to apply those resources, and I can also, more importantly, budget in terms of what I'm going to need to do. If I can see where the delta is, I can tell you how much that will cost in terms of human capital, in terms of tool spend. And for me as a leader, that's fundamentally changing to how I approach compliance as a part of my wider information security program. I'd ask for any questions. This is a recorded webinar, so there's a limited interaction that you can have with me. But I hope that you will post questions to me. I hope that we'll take some time to either interact via LinkedIn or via email channel. There's my LinkedIn and email. That you'll reach out to us as a company to learn more, or to Schellman to understand more about what they do and why it's really valuable. I hope this was useful to you. I found it a really interesting opportunity. I said I love working with customers who have chosen an auditor because they value the services they're delivered and are usually also doing compliance and GRC for the right reasons. So for us, those are the kind of people we want to talk to. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. But otherwise, enjoy the rest of your day. Absolute pleasure. And hopefully I will see you on the road at some point soon. Thank you again for your time. Take care and stay safe.